My name is Rachel Voss, and I am 33 years old, and I need to tell you something before I tell you anything else. The CEO who stood up that night at my sister's wedding had never met my father before in his life. He did not know him. He had not been invited specifically for this moment. He had come because my husband was the reason his company still existed, and nobody in that room knew that except one person, and that person was not me. I did not know what Marcus had done until the CEO said it out loud. And when he said it, my father's champagne glass was still in his hand from the toast he had just given. The toast that lasted 10 minutes and 40 seconds. I timed it. I will explain why, and did not contain my husband's name once. Hold that image. My father, standing at a microphone, 10 minutes of words, 206 guests, and my husband sitting beside me at the head table with his hands folded in his lap and his face completely still. Not hurt. Not performing. Not hurt. Simply still, the way Marcus is still when something is happening that he has already decided how to absorb, and then the CEO stood up. But I am getting ahead of myself, and this story does not work if I get ahead of myself. Because what happened that night was the product of 33 years of a particular family dynamic. And if I skip to the moment you are already waiting for, you will understand what happened, but you will not understand what it meant. And the meaning is the whole thing. So let me take you back. My father, Gerald Whitmore, is a man who has built his entire identity around the concept of the successful son-in-law. I do not say this with cruelty. I say it because it is accurate in the specific way that uncomfortable truths are accurate, which is that once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and I have spent a long time seeing it. My father grew up with very little in Akron, Ohio, the second of 4 children, the first to finish college, the first to wear a tie to work and mean it. He built a stable life through discipline and sacrifice and a genuine refusal to accept the limitations other people tried to assign him. This was admirable. This was real. And somewhere in the translation of that struggle into stability, somewhere between the first good house and the second better car, he developed a vision. The vision was this. His daughters would marry men who had arrived. Men with titles and corner offices and the kind of names that came up at Chambers of Commerce dinners. Men who looked from the outside like completion. Not because he was shallow, I want to be careful here, but because he had worked so hard for the surface of things that the surface had become, over decades, the thing itself. My older sister Dana delivered this vision precisely and on schedule. She married Connor Hartley at 29. Connor was a senior vice president at a commercial lending firm in Cleveland. Third-generation Ohio money, golf handicap that he mentioned with practiced humility, a father who had gone to the same college as Gerald Whitmore 30 years apart and therefore constituted, in my father's mind, a kind of cosmic alignment. Connor wore his watch on the outside of his shirt cuff and shook hands the way men shake hands in movies about men who matter. My father loved Connor Hartley, the way some men love the version of themselves they never got to be. Then there was me, and there was Marcus. Marcus Voss came into my life at a point when I had stopped expecting anyone in particular. I was 26, working as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized distribution company in Columbus, living in an apartment with a leaky kitchen faucet I had stopped noticing, and a life that was fine in all the ways that fine is not quite enough. Marcus was a friend of a colleague who showed up at a group dinner at a Thai restaurant on a Wednesday in November and sat across from me and asked questions for 2 hours with the full attention of someone who actually wants to hear the answer, not the attention of someone performing curiosity while waiting for their turn to talk. When the dinner ended, he walked me to my car in the November cold and said he would like to do this again, just us if I was open to it. No performance, no overture. Just a clear, direct statement of what he wanted, offered without pressure, waiting for an honest answer. I said I was open to it. I meant it completely. What Marcus did for work was difficult to explain at dinner parties, and I will be honest with you about that, because Marcus always was. He had started a software company at 24 with a college roommate and a credit card. The company built logistics optimization tools, which sounds boring until you understand what it means, which is that his software decided how freight moved through the country more efficiently. Not glamorous, not a thing you could gesture out over cocktails. No office that impressed people from the lobby. A team of 11 people in a converted warehouse space in Columbus, and a product that the companies who used it could not imagine operating without, and a revenue model that had been quietly profitable for 3 years before I ever sat across from Marcus at that dinner. My father did not understand what Marcus did. My father tried to understand it once, at Easter, when Marcus explained it for about 4 minutes before my father's eyes moved to the television in the corner of the living room where a golf tournament was playing. My father said "nump" and reached for the bread rolls, and that was the end of that conversation. Connor Hartley, across the table, talked about a commercial lending deal he had closed in Pittsburgh, and my father leaned forward and asked clarifying questions for 20 minutes. I watched this happen in real time. I watched it and filed it in the place where I keep the things I understand about my family, but have chosen not to organize into an argument. Marcus drove home that night and said almost nothing until we were 20 minutes outside Columbus, and then he said quietly, not in the tone of complaint, but in the tone of someone reporting an observation, "Your father is not sure what to do with me." I said I knew. He said it was okay, and then he turned on the radio and we drove the rest of the way home, listening to music. That was 3 years before Dana's wedding. Dana married Connor in September. I want you to understand that the wedding was a beautiful event, genuinely, because Dana was happy and Connor was decent to her, and happiness at a wedding is worth acknowledging even when other things are also true. The venue was a restored estate outside Cleveland. 180 guests, string quartets during cocktail hour, a 10-piece band for the reception, a floral budget my mother mentioned with a specific pride that told me exactly how large it was. My father's toast that night lasted 7 minutes. I know because I was sitting at the head table watching the clock on the wall, because I had already learned, from a lifetime of paying attention to my father, that the length of the toast would tell me something true about how he valued the thing being toasted. 7 minutes. He talked about Connor's family, Connor's career, Connor's character, the kind of man Connor was, and the kind of man Gerald Whitmore had always hoped to stand beside at his daughter's wedding. He cried at the end. Real tears. I watched them. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table. I filed this too. Now, here's what I need you to understand before I get to my own wedding day, before I get to the toast, before I get to what the CEO stood up and said. Something happened in the year before our wedding that I did not know about, that Marcus did not tell me about, that he made a decision about a loan at 2 in the morning in that converted warehouse space in Columbus while I was asleep at home with no idea. I am going to tell you what it was, but not yet, because the order matters, and I need you to be inside that reception hall when the truth finally arrives, not standing outside looking in at it, so stay with me for just a little longer. Our wedding was in April, smaller than Dana's, intentionally, joyfully smaller. 92 guests, a venue in Columbus we both loved, a renovated building with exposed brick and honest proportions, not a production, a gathering. Marcus's family from Michigan, my family from Akron, our friends, the genuine ones, the kind who had been there on ordinary Tuesdays and not just on the days worth photographing. The guest list had gone through several conversations. My parents had asked about the head count. My mother had suggested a few additions, family friends, neighbors, people who would expect to be included. We had said yes to most and drawn a line at some, and that was that. But there was one name, Marcus, added 2 months before the wedding, that I had not heard before. I noticed it when I was reviewing the final RSVP list. A single name, no +1, listed simply as a business contact of Marcus's. I asked him about it at dinner. Marcus said it was someone he'd worked with, that he had extended the invitation because it felt right, and could he explain more later because he was in the middle of something. I said sure. I forgot to ask again. I will tell you who this person was. But not yet, because you need to be sitting inside that reception hall first. The reception had been going for about an hour when my father picked up the microphone. This was planned. He had been scheduled for the father of the bride toast, the traditional one, and I had told myself not to time it, told myself not to do what I had done at Dana's wedding, told myself that whatever length it was, would be what it was, and I would receive it and move on. I timed it. 1 minute and 12 seconds. I know the exact number because I watched the seconds on my phone under the table, and when he put the microphone down, I looked at that number and I held very still. 1 minute and 12 seconds. He had talked about how Rachel had always been the quiet one, the sensible one. He had said he was proud to have raised a daughter who knew her own mind. He had said he wished the young couple well. He had not said Marcus's name. He had not described Marcus at all. He had not indicated anything about who the man he was toasting actually was, or what he had built, or who he was to the daughter he claimed to be proud of. 1 minute and 12 seconds, no name, no description, and a sit down. He had given Connor Hartley 7 minutes and tears. Real tears. The kind you cannot manufacture. The kind that come when something matches perfectly the image you have been carrying inside yourself for years. Connor Hartley had matched the image. I was watching right now in real time what it looked like to not match it. Marcus was still. I looked at him. He looked at me. He did not look wounded. He looked like a man who had just had a prediction confirmed, which is a different expression entirely, and which in some ways is worse to witness than hurt, because hurt means it was unexpected, and this was not unexpected. I opened my mouth and he shook his head gently once. Not now. I closed my mouth. The room applauded politely, because rooms do not know what else to do when something has happened that everyone registered, but no one will name. You could feel the recognition move through the guests, the way weather moves through a room when a window opens. Everyone felt it, nobody turned toward it, and then a chair scraped. Across the room, 2 tables from the back, a man I had seen in the RSVP list but never met was standing up. He was in his mid-50s, gray at the temples, not dressed to signal anything in particular. The quiet clothing of someone who stopped needing to signal things a long time ago. He did not look around the room for attention. He already had it. The way some people simply command a room when they rise, not through performance, but through the specific gravity of someone who has made consequential decisions for decades and carries that in their posture. He was holding a champagne glass and he was looking at the microphone, and then he looked at the host and said calmly, "May I?" It was not quite a question. Do you want to know who he was? I know you do. I am going to tell you. But I need you to know one more thing first, because without it, what he said will land at partial depth, and this story deserves full depth. 14 months before our wedding, Marcus's company had a crisis. That is the word I use now. Crisis, because I have learned that word since. At the time, I knew only that Marcus was working very late, was quieter than usual at home, was in the warehouse space until 1 and 2 in the morning for a stretch of about 3 weeks. I asked if everything was okay. He said there were some things he was working through at work. I said I was here if he needed to talk. He said he knew, and he thanked me, and he went back to his laptop, and I went to sleep, and this is what it looks like when someone protects you from something they have decided to carry alone. What he was carrying, one of his 2 largest clients had terminated their contract without warning after an internal restructuring at their company. That contract represented 31% of his annual revenue, gone in a single email, with a 2-week courtesy notice and an apology that used the word "unfortunately" 4 times. At the same time, a software update his team had been developing for 8 months hit a critical problem 11 days before a major delivery deadline to his second-largest client. The kind of problem that does not announce itself until the worst possible moment. The kind that sits quietly in the code for weeks and then surfaces at midnight when everything is already fragile. Marcus had 11 people depending on their salaries. He had a lease on the warehouse space. He had 3 months of operating runway if he spent nothing and earned nothing, which was not a situation anyone could sustain. He had a delivery deadline he was not sure he could meet and a revenue hole that was growing, and he sat in that warehouse at 2 in the morning on multiple consecutive mornings and made decisions without telling me because he did not want me to carry what he was carrying. This is the part I have thought about the most since learning it, not the crisis itself, but the protection. The deliberate, sustained decision to absorb the weight alone so I would not feel it. He fixed it. I did not know the details of how until the man stood up at my wedding. And here is where I tell you who the man was. His name was Thomas Garrett. He was the CEO of a supply chain technology firm based in Chicago, a firm with 400 employees and a reach across the logistics industry that made him, in that world, a genuinely significant person. He had come across Marcus's software 2 years earlier through an industry contact, had evaluated it, and had been in early conversations about a potential partnership when Marcus's crisis hit. What Marcus did at 2 in the morning when he was deciding how to save the company was call Thomas Garrett, not to ask for money, not to ask for a rescue, to offer him something. Marcus had been sitting on a piece of proprietary route optimization code that he had built as a side development and not yet integrated into his main product. It was, according to Thomas Garrett, and I am using the word he used that night at my wedding, extraordinary. Marcus called him at 11 at night and said he would license this code at a below-market rate in exchange for an accelerated partnership agreement that would provide stable revenue within 60 days. He had run the numbers. He had a proposal. He delivered it clearly and without panic at 11 o'clock at night while his company was in crisis. Thomas Garrett signed the agreement 4 days later. Within 90 days, Marcus's company was not just stable, it was in the strongest position it had been since founding. The partnership with Garrett's firm had opened 3 additional client relationships. He hired 2 new people. He fixed the software problem. He delivered on time. He never told me any of this. Not during the crisis, not after it resolved, not in the year between resolution and our wedding day. I asked once why he had been so stressed that month, and he said there had been some contract turbulence, but it had worked out. I believed him, filed it, moved on. This is what I mean when I say Marcus is the kind of person who carries things. Thomas Garrett stood up at my wedding because Marcus had sent him an invitation 2 months before the ceremony and had written on the handwritten note inside, in his plain, direct way, "You helped save something I built. I would like you to see what I am building next." Thomas Garrett had driven 4 hours from Chicago because of that note. He had never been to Columbus before. He had come because that sentence had stayed with him, and he thought a man who wrote a sentence like that on a wedding invitation was a man worth 4 hours of driving. He stood up and he said he wanted to add something if the family would allow it. He looked at my father when he said this. My father, Gerald Whitmore, who had just sat down from his 1-minute 12-second toast, looked at this man he did not recognize and nodded the way you nod when you are uncertain but do not want to appear uncertain. And Thomas Garrett started talking. He talked for 4 minutes. I know because I was still holding my phone and the timer was still running and I let it run because I needed to know. He told the room what Marcus had done, not in the language of flattery, not in the elevated tones of wedding speeches. In the language of industry, of actual events, of a man describing what he had witnessed another man do under pressure when no one was watching. He said that in 27 years of building and running companies, he had met very few people who had the combination of technical clarity, personal steadiness, and what he called moral precision that Marcus Voss had demonstrated at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night when his company was in crisis, and his options were limited. He said that the code Marcus had developed was now a core feature in his firm's product used by clients in 11 states. He said that Marcus had asked for nothing beyond the terms of the agreement, had not renegotiated, had not leveraged the situation, had simply delivered what he said he would deliver and then gone back to work. He raised his glass, he said, to Marcus Voss, who builds things that last, and to Rachel, who clearly already knew that. The room stood up. Not just applauded. Stood up. 92 people in a room in Columbus who had just been given 4 minutes of someone telling the truth about a man they mostly already knew, and the standing was the room's way of saying yes, that is who he is, we recognize him. I was not looking at the room. I was looking at my father. Gerald Whitmore was still in his seat when the room rose. He rose a beat later, the way people rise when something has shifted under them and their body knows it before their mind does. He was holding his champagne glass and he was looking at Marcus with an expression I had never seen from him. Not once in 33 years. Not directed at Marcus or at anything associated with me. He was looking at Marcus the way my father looks at Connor Hartley. And I watched him understand, in real time, the distance between 1 minute and 12 seconds and 7 minutes, and what that distance had cost him. I squeezed Marcus's hand. He squeezed back. He was not triumphant. He was just Marcus, still, present, exactly what he had always been. He had not arranged this moment. He had not planned it. He had invited a man who helped save something he built to witness the next thing he was building. The rest was Thomas Garrett's doing, and Thomas Garrett had made his own decision about what to say. After the reception, my father found Marcus near the bar. I was 20 feet away talking to my aunt and I watched it happen without going over because it was not my moment to manage. My father extended his hand. Marcus shook it. My father said something. Marcus listened. My father said something else, shorter, and Marcus nodded. They stood there for maybe 2 minutes, and then Marcus came over to me and my father went to find my mother. And I asked Marcus what had been said. Marcus said my father had told him that he had not understood what Marcus had built, and that he should have made more of an effort to understand it, and that the speech was something he would not forget. Marcus told me this without editorializing, in the same straightforward tone he uses to describe everything. I asked if he felt okay. He said yes. I believed him because with Marcus I always know which yes is the true one. The next morning my father called me, earlier than he usually called, which told me he had not slept well and that whatever he wanted to say had been sitting with him since the night before. He said he owed me an apology. He said he knew how long his toast had been, and he knew what that said, and he was sorry. He said the words plainly, without cushioning, which is the only form of apology I can actually hear from my father, because his cushioned apologies always have a but inside them. There was no but this time, just the apology and the silence after it. I said I heard him. I said I appreciated that he said it. I said I needed him to know that Marcus had not arranged last night, that Thomas Garrett had come on his own terms and spoken on his own authority, and that if my father wanted to know what Marcus had built there, was still time to ask him directly, and Marcus would answer honestly and without expecting anything in return, because that was simply how Marcus moved through the world. My father said he would like that. He said it quietly, like someone agreeing to something they know is overdue. 3 months after our wedding, Marcus and my father had dinner. Just them, in Columbus, at a restaurant Marcus chose that was not trying to impress anyone. Marcus explained the company from the beginning, 3 hours, every step of it. My father asked questions the entire time, real questions. The kind that indicate someone is actually trying to understand and not just appearing to listen. Marcus told me about it afterward in the car. He said my father was sharper about business mechanics than he had expected. He said it with genuine respect, not concession. My father called me the next day. He said he had spent the evening listening to someone build something from nothing and that he recognized it, the shape of it, because he had done his own version of it 30 years ago, smaller, in a different industry. And he had not seen the resemblance until Marcus walked him through it step by step. He said he thought he had been looking for something specific in a son-in-law and had not seen what was actually in front of him. He did not explain further. He did not need to. Connor Hartley still comes to Christmas. My father still enjoys talking to him. These things are true, and I hold them without requiring them to change. What also changed is that Marcus now comes to Christmas and my father asks him questions at the table and listens to the answers, and occasionally argues back, which is my father's highest form of engagement. Last year they disagreed about a supply chain decision Marcus was considering for 45 minutes over pie. My mother kept offering more whipped cream to manage her discomfort. Marcus and my father did not notice. I noticed. I sat at that table and watched my father argue with my husband about logistics strategy and felt something I had been waiting a long time to feel without quite admitting I was waiting for it. Thomas Garrett sent us a wedding gift that arrived 2 weeks after the ceremony. A card, handwritten, and inside the card, a framed print of the original partnership agreement he and Marcus had signed. At the end of those 3 crisis weeks, the signatures visible, the date visible, with a note that read, "The thing built before the wedding was practice. For the thing built after it, congratulations to you both." It is on the wall in our home office, not prominently, near the window, in the kind of light that hits it differently depending on the time of day. I look at it sometimes when I am working and I think about a man sitting alone in a warehouse at 2 in the morning, making calls he did not tell me about, fixing something he had built with his hands so that 11 people would still have jobs, and the thing he had made from nothing would still exist. I think about how he never asked me to admire that, how he never required me to witness it, how he carried it alone and resolved it alone, and then put it quietly on the wall and went back to work. My father gave Connor Hartley 7 minutes and tears. He gave Marcus 1 minute and 12 seconds and no name. And then a man he had never met drove 4 hours on a Saturday to say the things my father had not said. And my father sat in a room full of people who knew what they were hearing and understood, finally, what he had missed. I do not tell this story because I am still angry. I am not still angry. I am past anger into something quieter and more durable, which is the knowledge of what my husband is and the certainty that that knowledge does not require my father's confirmation to be true. It was always true. It will continue to be true whether anyone stands up and says it in a room or not. But here is what I know about silence. Silence is not neutral. The 1 minute 12-second toast was a statement. The 7-minute toast was a statement. Both were made in public, to 200 people, and both will outlast the night they were delivered. My father knows this now. I believe he knew it when he was delivering it and chose it anyway, and I believe he has had to live with that choice every day since Thomas Garrett stood up at a wedding in Columbus and said the words my father should have said himself. That is not revenge. Marcus did not plan revenge. Marcus did not plan revenge. Thomas Garrett did not come to deliver a verdict. What happened was simply the natural outcome of a man who builds things honestly, for years, without performance, without press releases, without anyone watching except the people who depend on what he makes. Eventually, the thing you build becomes undeniable. Eventually, someone who knows its true size walks into a room and says so. You cannot rush this. You cannot arrange it. You can only keep building. And when the room finally goes quiet and someone stands up and tells the truth about the life you have made while others looked past it, you sit very still with your hands folded in your lap, the way Marcus sat, and you let the truth do its work. That is all you ever had to do. The truth was always enough. You just had to stay in the room long enough to let it speak. Thank you for staying until the very end. If this story reached something real in you, please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments what it touched. I read every single one. I will see you next time.